Alright, so I'm going to first just start out by going over the types of strategic rationales that my research is on, just so that we are all on the same page. So I'll start with the business case. This is the dominant rationale out there if we look at different companies pushing for inclusion. We hear about it all the time. Here are just some examples from different corporate settings on the business case in various types of marketing materials or on websites. We hear the diversity practitioner talking about these things. These really came into play in the 1990s, became pretty much proliferated throughout the industry. And the whole idea here is that we should be excited to include women and racial minorities, people with disabilities, people of different age groups, because it is beneficial to the bottom line, to the business. It makes us better as organizations, makes us better as companies, and improves the bottom line. This seems like it should be convincing. Many of us know that these benefits exist, but there's still a question of whether it persuades others to hold more pro-equity beliefs and engage in inclusive behavior. All right, so is this actually driving the behavior that we want? And that's what I'm going to begin to, what I am beginning to unravel in my research. I'm going to share some of that. But before we get into more of the specifics, I'm going to just show the other framing that companies can use. So the middle is a poster. So the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, our agency, government agency that enforces the Civil Rights Act, that prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, gender, religion, national origin, color. That's posters required to be posted in every workplace with over 15 employees. So that's supposed to notify everyone of their rights, so they know what the law is and that they have rights under the law. This other poster here talks about, actually this is the cover of a book, but that just gives an idea, the Civil Rights Act. It shows some imagery from this era when it's passed. So part of the issues with the legal framing, and I think why companies and managers sometimes shy away, is because this imagery comes to mind. Maybe it's outdated. This isn't where we are now. We're seeing more women in the workplace. We're seeing more racial minorities. If anything, maybe some of the organizations are talking what some people would think too much about them. So the law is it seems outmoded for some. So that's part of the reason I think some companies shy away, but this is the second framing. The third is the moral case for diversity. So this has nothing to do with the instrumental. So the legal, because you're avoiding punishments, or the business, because you want to gain economically. This is saying that diversity and inclusion is right in and of itself. It's the right thing to do. And fairness and opportunity to all groups is something that should be part of corporate values, separate from the bottom line. So you don't see as much of this anymore either. Much of this drove the legal case, at least within the United States context. It drove the legal case in the passage of the Civil Rights Act in the first place. But you don't see, it's much harder to find this out there than it is the business case and legal. So, right, so that's just an overview of these three. I want to talk a little bit more about the history as well, about how we got to the business case. We kind of take it for granted now because we all kind of see it everywhere. We use it a lot potentially. So where did it come from? So this is within the context of U.S. law. We started with the passage of the Civil Rights Act in '64, which I mentioned before prohibits discrimination in the workplace. In the initial years, it wasn't enforced strongly, so it didn't define what discrimination is. It didn't say how companies who had always been legally discriminating and excluding on the basis of gender and race and other characteristics, it didn't tell them necessarily what they needed to do to come in compliance. In 1972, we had the Equal Employment Opportunity Act that was passed that gave more specific guidelines on what companies had to do and how they were going to be held liable if they did not fall in compliance with those more specific guidelines. So that's when we saw affirmative action programs come to be. We saw EEO officers being hired, different types of these outreach and other programs being set up to further integrate the workplace to make sure, okay, now we have to get our act together and make sure that we are being inclusive. In the Reagan era, so when President Ronald Reagan was in office, there was much more backlash to affirmative action. So there was resistance to many of these policies, resistance to government intervention alone, particularly when it came to these types of things. More claims being brought by men and whites who had traditionally been more privileged and had the preference in the workplace. They brought lawsuits saying that these programs discriminate against them. So then the companies had to figure out, okay, do we get rid of them, given that we can face these reverse discrimination claims? But instead, what they did is they just reframed and infused all of what they already had there with value, saying, we have this, but this is because it makes us better as a company. So then there was a different type of rationale for what they were doing that didn't require any law to support it, saying that this makes us more innovative, profitable, better problem solving, and that's when you really saw a rise to the business case in this diversity management movement. So with that,